Good morning. My name is Samuel García Gil and I am one of the authors, together with Salvador Gómez García and Itziar Reguero Sanz, of the paper titled Alternative Spaces of Freedom During the Transition, Brief History of Free Radio Stations in Spain, 1976-1983. The context of this study is the political change during democratic transition. Thanks to the freedom of expression, the renewal of media imposed in this period, in press, television, and radio, experiencing a new scenario of informative freedom. Concurrently to this eclosion, several types of radio stations were born on the fringes of majoritarian chains: pirate radio, municipal radio, and free radio stations. We will focus this study in the latter. Free radios are a communicative phenomenon that has barely been mentioned in general stories of communication in Spain. With this research, we aim to fill this historiographic gap, delving in the examination of this alternative movement. The main purpose of this paper is to reflect the relevance and singularity of the movement of free radios in Spain. In particular, the study's purpose is to specify the concept of free radio, as well as to examine the evolution of the movement in Spain through the analysis of the most outstanding radio stations. The methodology used to achieve these objectives backs up in a triple documentary perspective. Firstly, we have reviewed numerous bibliographic sources. We combined the different contributions done from the academic sphere using the testimonies of respondents and volunteers in written. Secondly, this study is supported in hemerographic sources in order to show the reflection of free radio movements' activities on journalistic media. Newspapers object of study are El País, ABC, and La Vanguardia. Lastly, and in a complementary manner, the research also has oral sources. We conducted in-depth interviews to responsibles of historical free radios in the Spanish landscape, so to know the view of the direct protagonists of this movement. Once this triple analysis was done, we present the following findings. Although the heterogeneity of the movement makes the definition difficult, we can establish that free radios are voluntary, privately owned, economically and institutionally independent, with a democratic or assembly-like decision-making process, participative with listeners, plural regarding topics managed and engaged in the support of minoritarian social collectives or collectives under exclusion risk. What differentiates a free radio from a pirate radio? These movements entail some similarities but also noticeable differences. Both are targeted to a young public and presume of having a rebel spirit, using a relaxed and colloquial style that breaks with the tenor of majoritarian radio stations. Besides, the two phenomena oppose against waves dictatorship, that is, they are against the fact that the broadcasting spaces were determined by the state, and as a consequence, there is priority for the stations that are closer to the government postulates. Despite the similarities between these alternative movements, the main difference between pirate radio and free radio is that the latter is non-profit, since it is driven by ideological and social purposes. The first free radios broadcasts in Spain date back to 1976. During these first years, there were four focuses of particular interest where the greatest number of free radios concentrated: Catalonia, the Basque Country, Navarre and Madrid. Some examples in these communities include La Voz del Pobre in Madrid, Radio Maduisa in Granollers, Ona Lliure in Barcelona, and Osina Irratia in Renteria. These free radios broadcasted using frequency modulation due to the lower economic expense of the broadcasting device and its easy assembly. In their first years of life, these radio stations suffered an illegal status. The continuous conflicts with the state caused several closures, sealing-offs, confiscation of technical material, and judicial problems, which explains their constant fragility from the very start of the broadcasting. Therefore, from the first moment, free radios united as movement to advocate their rights to broadcast in the waves. The maximum expression of this coordination produced in the year 1983, with the so-called Manifiesto de Villaverde. It exposed the need and the right of any individual and collective person to freely express their opinions. This manifesto entails positive consequences for the collective in terms of visibility and reaffirmation of the movement in its entirety, so that new stations could emerge in the following years. Between 1983 and 1988, at least 24 free radio projects saw the light of day in the community of Madrid, while these stations expanded through the dial in the whole state. But closures boycotted the stability of all these radio stations. The constant police interventions hindered the standardization of free radios, despite the combative spirit of the promoters. The movement also weakened due to internal conflicts, diluting after the law of telecommunications and the subsequent sale of FM licenses in 1989. Only 2 free radio stations achieved legal permission, while most closed definitively to avoid the high fines they could receive. However, the spirit and reivindications of free radios were not forgotten. Currently, there are communitarian radio stations that make the most of the new technological environment and internet possibilities to do essentially the same their predecessors pursued: communicate without restrictions and in freedom. The study we introduce here is part of the research project titled Profiles of the Political Center 1976-1986, Projects and Performances, funded by the Ministry of Economy and Competitiveness of the Government of Spain.